All right, we are on Hilchos Yesodei Torah, fifth perek, halacha yud. Okay, in the continuing discussion of chillul Hashem and kiddush Hashem. So yud 10. Kola over midaito below onus alachas mikol mitzvahs hamors b'Torah. Okay, anyone who knowingly, commits an avera b'sha'at b'nefesh. Okay, he does it knowingly and willingly, lahachis, and he does it what we call lahachis, on purpose, knowing full well what he's doing. Hariz machal es Hashem. Okay, so this is an example of knowing that you're doing it is wrong, and still you do it anyway. That's called lahachis, and that is called chillul Hashem. So you tack on to whatever penalty you get for that specific avera, you tack on a chillul Hashem. Right? When you swear falsely, the Torah in Kedoshim says, for this specific avera, you are machal Hashem. Okay, so it's not only the avera you get for that specific sin, you add on the concept of chillul Hashem. As we spoke about, right? When you do it in front of 10 people, okay. By the way, could women count? Or is it like a minion? Right? When you talk about it in front of 10 people, usually 10 signifies a minion, which doesn't include women. So it's an interesting question I don't really know the answer to. It sounds like women are included because it says Mi Yisrael. But okay, just a concept. So for the good stuff,
Rabbi Soloveitchik discusses that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So for the good stuff, the women aren't included. But for the bad stuff, close your ears, Deborah. But for the bad stuff, they are included. So we have okay. All right, we'll continue. The Ken Kol HaPoresh Me'avera. So let's do something optimistic now. Let's do something positive. If you refrain from sinning, asa mitzvah, lo mipnei davar ba'olam, and if you do a mitzvah just for the sake of it, you have no motive, you have no reason, you have nothing, right? You have no other reason, just for the sake of the mitzvah. Lo pachad, lo yira, no one's asking you, no one dared you, no one bet you $100. V'lo levakesh kavod, you're not looking to score points, right? You're just doing it for the sake of it. Elam ibnei habore baruchu, right? Kiminias Yosef hatzadik atzmo me'eshes rabo. If you do it, and the Rambam compares, right? The commentators all jump on the Rambam, well, not jump on him, but they're wondering why they're comparing to Yosef. But the Rambam compares someone doing something just for the love of it, right? Like Yosef, who what did Yosef do so good? He held himself back, me'eshes rabo, right, from the whole story with Potiphar, his wife. Harizim Akadesh es Hashem. That is the ultimate, right? The commentators quote the Gemara and Sota that talk about Yosef was Makadesh Shem Shemayim by holding himself back, right? The point over here is sometimes you could do something actively, right? Barabim, and everyone knows about it, or sometimes you do something, right? It's not what you do, it's what you don't do, right? That doesn't get as much fanfare. But perfect example is Yosef, who held himself back, and he got rewarded quite nicely for his restraint. All right, and the Gemara also talks about what the Rambam says here. Where he says, "Porish ma'avera." Sometimes, how are you makayim a mitzvah? If you really have an opportunity to, let's say, you walk by someone and you want to steal something, right, and you hold yourself back. So you're actually makayim a mitzvah. It's not just that you're not stealing, right? You're actually holding yourself back, and fighting your temptation, right, to steal something, and you don't, then you're Makayim lo tignov, right? If you're doing nothing and you're minding your own business, you're not being Makayim lo tignov, right? But if you have the or lo sigzol, more apropos, right? If you have the opportunity and you overcome, that's golden. Okay, we'll continue on to the last. I believe this is the last one of the perek, and after this one, we switch topics completely. So says the Rambam, "V'yesh dvarim acherim shehen b'chlal chillul Hashem." So now we're going to get back to the negative. Let's talk about the other things that are included in the category of chillul Hashem. V'husha yase oso adam gadol b'Torah. Okay, so this is an unfortunate Rambam that hits home a lot, because unfortunately we hear about stories, and when they happen to prominent people, right, whose bars are set possibly too high, right, even when they do things that aren't horrible, right, still they get talked about a lot because it happens to people with long beards and yarmulkes, and we're supposed to know better, right? So that's exactly what the Rambam over here focuses on. So he says, he calls it V'hushiyasa oso adam gadol b'Torah u'mefursam b'chasidus, someone who's a chassid, whatever that means. Dvarim shehabrios moranin and acharav bishvilan, right? Someone who's well known, okay, when he does something, although they don't sin usually, but when they do something even minor, so that'll cause the Welt, right, to start talking and say, oh, did you hear about this rabbi? Did you hear about that rabbi, what he did? So you got to be very, very, very careful when the bar is set very high. It's very nice when the bar is low, right? We all love low bars, right? The problem is when you've made it, right, the greater you are, as they say, the harder you fall. So that's unfortunately the reality today. Okay, and the Rambam gives an example. What's an example? He says, "V'afal on the second line, he says, "She'enan averos," even though they may not be technically considered sins, harei zachil es Hashem, this person is still machal Hashem. How? Shalakach ve'eno nosen demei hamekach la'alter. So the first example he gives is someone who, let's say, buys something, okay, and he doesn't pay for it right away. And we know that he has the money, but he says, oh, put it on my tab, right? So that doesn't look good. Someone who has the ability to pay for something, okay, and doesn't pay for it. Now, this is like, out of all the examples, I mean, this is a little, a little weird, but nevertheless, I think the Gemara in Kiddushin talks about this as a story of someone waiting online to buy meat, and he didn't pay for it, and I think it's in Nasara Hayuchsin at the end of Kiddushin. It rings a bell. His name was Rabbi Yehuda Bar Yecheskel, I think, and someone called him a name. Anyway, so that rings a bell. So you have to be careful when you have the ability to pay for something and you don't. So people say, oh, why does this guy, why does this person not have to pay for something? So that's not a good thing. Okay, now you're not stealing anything, you're putting it on your bill, right? Like buy now, pay later, right? There's no sin in that, but it just doesn't look good. And perception is very, very important, which is again the key to chillul Hashem in the eyes of the Rambam. So that's one example. So what's another example where you're like, you're hanging around people that aren't so good, you're joking with them, you're not acting properly. All right. Shedibur imabrios eno benachas, or you're speaking to people and you just don't speak nicely, right? You curse, you're this, right? You're just talking not nicely. And you're not accepting people nicely, right? Remember that Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, Havi Makabel Kol Adam, right? Sever Panim Yafos. right? Elabakatata vakas. Everything you do is a fight, right? Every deal you get into ends up in a fight, right? Not good. Ukiyotze, again, these are things that Rambam are pointing out that aren't per se. There's no, right? You're not being over one of the 365 lavin specifically. You're just not a nice guy, right? So there's nothing specific, but it's the overall tenor, right, of your personality. Ukiyotze bedvar ha'elu hakol lefi gadlo shel chacham, right? It's all relative to how great you are or how perceived great you are. You have to go above and beyond the law. There are many, many Gemaras, right, that talk about it. It says I think in Bava Metzia Lamed Aleph, Locharva Yerushalayim, I think, right, Rav Yochanan says at the end of El Metzias that the reason why Yerushalayim was destroyed is because they were very, very medaktek. They never, right, let anything slide, and Meshuras Hadin, right? It's very, very important that you have to know how to conduct yourself and go above and beyond the law, right? But on the other hand, if you're very, very particular with yourself and you speak nicely to people, right, and you're calm, cool, and collected, and here's a trait that I love, right? There are 3 or 4 Gemaras and right that quote one of the most virtuous deeds of a person. It's called Ne'elavin ve'enam olvin, or as we say in English, they could take it and they don't dish it, right? Someone who's on that kind of level, right? Remember what the Gemara says, the ohavav kitseis hashemish bigvuraso, right? A pasuk in Shoftim, right, is as strong as the sun. Right, and I think I heard the vart once. Why is it compared to the sun blazing out in the morning? Because if you remember the medrash about the sun and the moon, right? The sun took it and didn't dish it when the moon had a complaint. Why are you so much bigger, right? Or not you so much bigger, but why both of us can't coexist together? And the reward that the sun got was that the sun ended up bigger because the sun took it and didn't dish it. So that's why we say over here, Ne'elavin ve'enam olvin, right? They hear it from people and they close their mouths. A great, great midah to have. Mechabed today, it's forget it. Mechabed lahan va'afilu lemaklin lo, and he respects people even if people ridicule him. V'nosa v'nosin be'amuna. Right, someone who's honest, right? Remember the Gemara in Shabbos Lamed Aleph says this is the first thing they ask you when you get up there. They don't ask you if you studied Torah or if you gave tzedakah. The very, very first thing they ask you is, were you honest? Right? And you don't hang out with Amoratzim, right? You don't loiter with them. Right? You study Torah, atuf betzitzis, right? You're wearing tzitzis, muchtar betfilin, va'osa b'chol masav l'fnei meshuras hadin, and everything you do is above and beyond the letter of the law. V'hu shelo yisrachek harbe v'lo yishtomem. Wow. So it sounds like the Rambam is going to say, and you do this, and you do that, and you live, and you're a malach. And Rambam says, no, you're not like the Navardics that would go out in the forest and hibernate, right? And make sure not to sin because you're not anyone, right? Because you're not around anybody for 10 years. That's not the way to be good, right? Is to escape and avoid the world. Rambam says you got to keep, right? This is the Rambam Lashitaso of middle of the road. So that's exactly what the Rambam is saying over here. Don't hide in the forest and don't run away in order to avoid the people, right? You got to deal with the people. You have to do both. You have to go out in the business world. You have to do business. You have to do this. You have to do that. But just be careful. Don't steal from people, right? And don't be this. Don't be that. Be a good guy, and be involved though. Don't just take the easy way out. Very, 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 very important thing that the Rambam is stressing over here. Right? when you have all of these, everyone would praise you. This is someone who's praiseworthy, who does all the characteristics that we just mentioned. And this is the penultimate. This is, says the Rambam, Harize Kiddush es Hashem. This is the ultimate Kiddush Hashem. This is what the pasuk in Yeshayahu says, where Yeshaya says, Vayomer li avdiyata. Right? God says, you Yisrael, you are my Eved, Asher b'cha yispa'er. I will be glorified in you. That is the ultimate compliment that God could pay us, right? When we're virtuous in all of these midos that the Rambam mentioned, without running away and hiding. So that's it for today. Tomorrow night we'll start the next topic that talks about mechika,